These days, esports' biggest players are basically nerdy rock stars. They're wearing $1,000 shoes, driving flashy sports cars, and even starring in overly obnoxious Doritos commercials. Life is pretty good for them, especially compared to a few years ago when tournaments were held in sweaty convention centers and all you got for winning was a cool PC or a bag of rice. But long before then, in a prehistoric era, there was one original superstar gamer, a trailblazing, groundbreaking neckbeard who not only won hundreds of thousands of dollars and won luxurious prizes, but ended up changing the way that we play games. Forever.
If you're of a certain age and you like video games, Dennis Thresh Fong is the Joe Namath of video games.
Now, the esports of today emerged from a lot of weird primordial oozes, but in the West, we can point specifically to the likes of Doom and Quake. And way back in the late 90s, when those games were most relevant, there was one undisputed champion. Dennis Thresh Fong was pretty much a living gamer stereotype back in the early 90s. He was a college student who lived with his parents and played a ton of Doom. And he became pretty good at it. So good, in fact, that leading up to a Microsoft-held Doom tournament in 1995, he was on a 1,500 game win streak. A feat that led to a newspaper referring to him as the most lethal killer in cyberspace.
Dude, when I was addicted to Quake, I would watch demos all the time from this guy named Thresh. Dennis Fong, there it is, Dennis Fong. He was the best. And while he was playing before he retired, he was the best. Like, he was so good that people would watch his demos and try to emulate his moves.
Even that early on in his career, Thresh was making $500 per public appearance from a peripheral company. But he leveled up pretty quickly. Just 2 years later, Thresh was making 6 figures from endorsements, and people were paying him to write celebrity game reviews. On top of that, he'd earned $250,000 in prize money in just 2 years of pro play, because, well, he was winning everything. Thresh was an esports pioneer at a time when esport wasn't even a word. He was getting sponsorships, he was flying around the US to compete in tournaments, and he was clicking on heads. He even laid the foundation for the now iconic, cringy edgelord gamer tags of today.
Power stroke, boy.
Sitting here with Big Dick Stacy.
Hello, adventurer. Suck my dick. That's the name you chose.
Thresh is short for Threshold of Pain, which sounds more like a Deathclock album than a thing you would actually call yourself.
Release the kitties.
Anyway, back then, esports tournaments were struggling to put together the kinds of eye-popping prize pools we see today. So sometimes they would offer the winner something a little different. Going into Red Annihilation, Thresh was on top of the world. The 1997 Quake tournament was one of the first major national tournaments in the US and whittled down 2,000 players online until just 16 were left to play at E3 in Atlanta. But the top 16 weren't playing for cash. No, they were playing for John Carmack's Ferrari. Okay, so you probably have a handful of questions at this point. 1, who the hell is John Carmack? 2, where did he get a Ferrari? 3, why in the hell would he put it up as the prize for a Quake tournament? Well, it turns out that the answers to these questions are all pretty nuts. First, who was John Carmack? Well, he was obsessed with computers and playing video games, and at 14 years old, made fucking acid out of thermite and Vaseline to melt his school's windows to steal all of their computers. He got arrested, and a psychiatric evaluation found that he was, quote, a brain on legs with no empathy for other human beings. Wow, a brain on legs, Jesus Christ. Now, this might sound like a fucked up thing to say about somebody, until you remember what Quake and Doom are like. Anyway, remember when I said that Doom and Quake were the biggest games in the world? Well, they were. And unlike today, they made the people who made them into celebrities. Carmack teamed up with John Romero, Tom Hall, and Adrian Carmack to found id Software in 1991, where they proceeded to crank out hit after hit. First came Wolfenstein, followed by Doom, and then Quake. Within 5 years of being founded, id effectively invented, polished, and perfected the blueprint for the first-person shooter genre.
You can't underestimate what John Carmack and John Romero have done for esports, and I think it's a criminal shame that no one has recognised either of those people with Lifetime Achievement Awards for esports, because they are the daddies, they are the founders. But beyond that, they were also the guys that started land-based esports. The fact remains that their games, without Quake, without Doom, without Hexen, without Castle Wolfenstein, we don't have 3D games. We don't have first-person shooters. We don't have Counter-Strike, which was built on Half-Life, which was built on a Quake engine, by the way.
It goes without saying, but these games were stupidly popular, with each selling hundreds of thousands of copies. Not bad for a small indie studio run by 4 code junkies. Alas, nothing lasts forever. Over the years, gaming's Roman Empire collapsed as id's founders butted heads. Romero and Hall left to form their own studio, Ion Storm, which eventually folded. And even id faded from relevance, as newer studios rose up to take first-person shooters forward. Anyway, where was I? Thresh, Carmack, Ferrari, right. So Carmack was absolutely loaded, thanks to the hits he developed, and so he did what any 20-something-year-old with more money than God would do. He threw his money at fast cars. Carmack had so many Ferraris that he was able to casually put one up as the grand prize at the Red Annihilation event, making it up to that point the highest value prize in competitive gaming's history. After tearing his way through the final 16, Thresh found himself in the grand finals against Entropy, who ended up being just another victim of his dominance.
Funny thing is, what I'm known for as a gamer is that I don't really get nervous.
You're calm.
I'm pretty, yeah, it doesn't really bother me. And actually, as I was playing this, I wasn't very nervous, but near the end of it, when I realized that I had won, I was looking and staring at the reflection of the Ferrari in my monitor, and it kind of freaked me out. And I got really nervous at the end.
Now, there were just a few teensy logistical problems with the grand prize, namely the fact that Thresh didn't know how to drive stick and the fact that he wasn't insured. In the end, Carmack not only gave Thresh his Ferrari 328, but he paid for his insurance coverage for a year.
He wound up using it as he had it sort of in the lobby of his company for a while as kind of a conversation piece. And he did, I think, eventually wound up selling it. I think I got a message from someone last year that still had it, so it's still functional at this point.
After making his name as one of the world's most successful gamers, Thresh went on to help found a slew of influential websites and services that ended up selling for millions of dollars. But his real enduring legacy is actually felt by every single person who plays PC shooters today.
When most people started playing games back in those days, you just used the keyboard. And then over time, people realized that the keyboard had a fixed rate of turn. So if you wanted to turn left, it would kind of go like that. So you wouldn't be able to flick. I found WASD on my left hand and then using the mouse on the right hand to be the most comfortable.
Thresh pioneered using WASD as his movement keys. And after winning so many tournaments with his setup, Carmack paid tribute to him by programming it into Quake as an optional config. But in time, WASD transcended Quake, becoming the default standard for the entire FPS genre. On top of that, his legacy has been paid tribute to in League of Legends, where everyone's favorite bug zapper swinging ghoul shares his moniker. These days, esports are a huge deal. It's growing every day. Tournaments are getting bigger, and our star players are becoming actual celebrities. 23 years ago, Thresh wasn't so far off from that. He was so famous, he had his face drawn next to Bill Clinton's on the Wall Street Journal. But it's been 2 decades since then. Now that's a long time in the real world, but it is an eternity in esports. People have 2-year careers and get called old and washed up by the time they're 21. Most of you youngins out there don't even know Thresh, let alone remember his accomplishments. Instead, his legacy lives on in WASD.
Here he comes once again. The first base is a Dren. He's going to hit the ground there as Cold. Oh, what? A jumping double from Cold! What is going on right now? How does he do this?
Esports' earliest pioneers may have changed the industry, but maybe more importantly, they changed the way you and I play games forever. And that's worth a lot more than a Ferrari you can't drive.
You know, last thing I want to say is, you know, obviously I think esports has a really, really bright future. And I'm humbled that, kind of the Hall of Fame has selected me to be part of this, because, you know, really what it means to me, and it really does mean the world to me, that my small contribution to the birth and growth of esports will be remembered in the future. So thank you so much, guys.
Acting! What? We had. Every time, dude. Every time. I'm a sucker for it. And 3, why in the flying fuck? What do you think? Yeah. And 3, why in the flying hell